The last time a change like this was done was in 2010 when patch method was added to HTTP spec. And now in 2026, we are getting a new method called as query. And this is a new method. That means this is not a variation of get, put, patch. This is not a new practice or a new convention. This is actually a new REST API method that you would be able to use in your code bases. Now let's take a look at what this is exactly, how does this work, and a few interesting takes that I have on this topic. Now this HTTP query, which is a new method, before we actually get into this, let me just quickly give you an introduction of what these methods are in the first place, right? What does this mean? So we have get, post, put, patch, a bunch of these interesting methods. If you would have there's an options as well, if you have heard about. There is another delete as well. So there are a lot of these methods, right? I don't think I'm missing anything. I think these are the most common ones. But anyway, the point is that there is a new method now getting added to the spec 16 years later, which is gonna be query. Now in 2010, we got patch added to the spec, and after that, there was a 16-year of radio silence. Now what this query method is, at least what the method denotes the use case to be, it's sort of like get only. So this method is like get, but with a twist that this can have a body, right? First of all, so the parameters, the request that you make can have a body, unlike get, because in get, you cannot have a body. If you send a body, most servers would discard that before actually processing your request. So this probably should point to this, right? That the query can have a body, and then there are some semantics, right? So this is also cacheable, right? So because once I wrote this, can I have a body, you could have argued like, why can it not be post, right? Because for others, let's say at least semantically, there's a different meaning, right? Put, patch, delete, options mean something else entirely. But post is sort of like a generic, right? You just use it with everything. So the reason you cannot use query and post interchangeably is that query is supposed to be cacheable. Now, I mean, technically speaking, if you own the CDN layer on your own, right? So, which, I don't think most of you would actually do, but if you own the CDN, which is in front of your backend, let's say this is your backend, and this is the client which makes a call to your backend via your CDN, and your CDN is supposed to just proxy all the requests. It's possible that you can also cache post responses and requests. It's inconvenient, but you can do it because your CDN can introspect the data that is coming and going, and it can see like if this is a request which you have enabled to be a cacheable request, it can just keep it there. The problem happens is that in most of the cases, the CDN is generally not owned by you, or it's actually very hard to tweak this. For example, if you're using Cloudflare, or if you're using Vercel CDN, or if you're using AWS CloudFront. So if you're using such options, the customization is there, but it's limited, right? You cannot really just write arbitrary code inside the CDN and execute it. That is where this query option, this query method is actually super useful, because imagine, I'll give you a real life example. Imagine that this backend is technically a database, right? And this client is actually, let's say, your backend, right? You have seen those solutions where, you are able to talk to your database over HTTP, right? I think Neon has this solution, and a bunch of them have the solution, even though like most of them also support now the ability to talk over WebSockets or TCP connections. But let's say, for the sake of simplicity of this example, let's say that your backend only makes select queries, right, for now, and this is against a static database. So this database is not changing. It's like a static database which has a lot of data. Now this becomes actually very easy for your backend to just send this request via a CDN, let's say, which is owned by like PlanetScale or Neon or whatever. And then this database responds, and because this is a query, like literally a query request, now you might think that this is a query, and it suits the name as well because we're talking about databases, but this is not exactly like that SQL query thing. This could be like any generic query. And when the response comes back, this is a cached response. That's all there is to this query method. That's all it does, that it sort of tries to act like a post method, but it gives the semantics that, the RFC which is there tells that caching is allowed, and you have to pass the request as a body. Let me actually quickly give you an example of this as well. So look at this. I have this get server and I have a query server. Let's first of all look inside get server what this is. You see, I'm using Node.js right now. Pretty standard, pretty typical stuff. So we are on port 3000. You just create a regular HTTP server. This is just LLM written code, so I'll just ignore the parts which are actually not relevant. It just added like a /contacts over here. If the request method is not get, we don't want to honor it, so that's also fine. You just get the query parameters directly from the URL, which is how you pass data in GET request, right? So in GET request, what you basically do is you do something like contacts and then query as whatever, limit as 5 and page number as 10, right? Something like this. Now another problem which I did not mention in the GET is that there is a limit to the URL size. You cannot have like a very large URL, right? So I think it's 8 KB or something, if I'm not wrong. So there is a fixed size of URL that you can pass. Obviously, query does not have such limitation, right? And this is actually useful because if you're literally writing a SQL, it's possible that your query here could be relatively larger. I would be surprised if you're writing a production SQL which is more than 8 kilobytes, but it could happen, right? The easiest example of this would be something like, render image, let's say, and the base 64 of that image is passed over here, right? This could definitely exceed 8 KB. Query, on the other hand, just requires you to pass in render over here, and rest of the URL parameters, so to speak, would go inside the body over here. Right, so that is what's happening. Over here, we are able to take out the data inside the GET server using the search params, and then you can just do whatever you want. On the other hand, for query server, we have a different approach. So we still have contacts. We honor the options method as well, so that's to allow that query is available. And then if it is not query, we just discard it. Query also requires you to pass a content type header, right? So you cannot proceed if you have not passed this header. This is according to the spec. And then finally, you can just read the body. And in terms of reading body, there is nothing special here that you would not do inside post request, right? So it's basically the same thing. And of course, once you have the data, it doesn't matter how it's coming, through the body or through the search params that we saw in the GET request. Once you have all of that, you can just work with the data now, right? And to give you an example, if I run this demo.sh, you're going to see that we get basically the same returns, same results using query as well as using GET. And there are a bunch of checks that, Fable also wrote for just checking some of these edge cases, right? Now, I have a super hot take on this. And before getting to that hot take, if you like backend, if you like networking, programming, you obviously like domains, right? Because you have to buy domains to host any service. And that is where today's sponsor, dnsimple, comes into play. So generally speaking, when you buy a domain, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. DNS records, whois information. So these are some of the easy things that can go wrong. But on the other hand, you also have things like CNAME aliasing. Then there's a concept of glue records, which allow you to create your own DNS servers. And a few more advanced features of DNS, which are just simply not available on a lot of providers. For example, CNAME aliasing is not available on GoDaddy. Glue records is not available on Cloudflare. And the most important, and something that almost all the providers lack, is human support. The last thing you want is that when you need some help with DNS and its configuration, that you don't have anyone to help you. And it's actually not a wise idea to wipe code your DNS, because if your AI makes even a small mistake, your production website can go down. That is where today's sponsor dnsimple comes into play. They do one thing and they do it right, which is managing your DNS hosting and domain name. Getting started with dnsimple is simple. All you have to do is create a free account, and once you do, you can add new domains or transfer existing domains from other platforms. For example, I recently bought this mehulmohan.ai domain from dnsimple using an AI agent itself. Let me show you how. dnsimple also offers a CLI which you can install, and once you do, you can register domain with a single CLI command like this. Now this command over here can be run either by you or by your AI agent. And the discovery of all the commands that exist for your AI agent is also simple because of the help flag. Let me actually register a .top domain through my AI agent. Hi Claude, I want you to register a domain for my project, which I would create in this folder. The domain that I'm thinking of is mehulmohan.top. First of all, check for the availability of this domain. Let me know the price, and then we will proceed to the registration part. Imagine that you are just wipe coding a project and you just want a domain, and all you have to do is just talk to your AI to register that for you. And as you can see, the moment it is done, Claude is now asking me what I want to do. Let's say I want to enable Whois privacy. I'll keep the auto renewal off for now, and I'll just go with the default settings for now, right? So this sounds good. Submit. And as you can see, within a few seconds, Claude was able to register a domain for me. And not only this can now also customize this for me if needed. For example, if you're deploying it on Vercel or Cloudflare or any of the hosting platforms, you can just ask Claude to configure the DNS, CNAME, A records, everything for you using the CLI itself. It's super simple to install and get started with CLI. As you can see, they have commands for macOS, Linux, even Windows. So once you do that, you have to authenticate, and that's all you have to do. Rest of the work, you can obviously go ahead and read what each command is doing, but leave it to the AI agents and they can do it for you. Of course, I still recommend that you edit these name servers or DNS records, or at least know what's going on over here instead of wipe coding it completely. But yeah, if you know what you're doing, you can just ask Claude to add an A record to a specific subdomain pointed to a specific IP address, and it'll just work. And once again, dnsimple has one of the best supports out there. So if you're stuck at any point once you buy a domain, you can reach out to their team and they'll assist you all the way. So do check out dnsimple. All the links are in the description. And now back to the video. All right, so my hot take on this topic is that this is mostly useless, right? And I just want to highlight the word mostly because of a number of reasons. First of all, this method is not solving any unsolved problem, right? Now, the web has matured a lot in the last 16, 15 years, right? A method, an HTTP method coming out of blue, after 16 years is a big deal. Yes, sure. But there are production services running hundreds of millions of requests, billions of requests every day, every minute, every hour. And all these practices of, caching and how to cache, how not to cache are more or less there. It's slightly inconvenient. Yes, I understand the problems that get presents in the size limits and, just exposing the data in the URL as well. But I mean, these are not really super burning problems, right? So I don't see what exactly is this solving in the first place that it is so important to introduce as a spec. But more than that, what I feel, which is bad in this, is more states, right? And this has been my biggest sort of one of the most controversial videos that I did in the recent times was, those couple of videos on Node.js. If you have not watched them, I will link it somewhere here. So that was the Node.js one and the backend one, right? How I design backend, or how our company used to design backend, because I've now sold the company. But how we used to design backends in our own startup, in our own company, and how the API was structured and designed. And then that video, I talk about, you can watch that video, I'll link it somewhere. But I talk about how we always use post and how we always use status of 200 OK, irrespective of whatever has happened, right? Now, what it does, if you think about it, look at this. You have get, post, put, patch, options. Options is not really, used in any of the, you can't really interchange options with the post, for example. But I'll still write it. We have head, we have delete, we have query as well now. I don't think I'm missing anything, but it's fine. Even if I am, you can just let me know. And in terms of status codes, we have the whole 200 to 299 range. Let's just have a 200 range. 100 is returned for connection upgrades and stuff, right? If I'm not wrong. Then 300 is for redirects. 400 is for client induced errors, apparently. And 500 is for server induced errors. Now, the problem is, obviously, these are not 100 status codes. But when you try to combine all of them together, for example, post can return 200 series. It can also return 300 or 400 or whatever. Similarly with put, get can return 100 if it's a WebSocket upgrade and so on. And in those cases, you need that, right? Because the browsers are hard-coded to see if HTTP server is returning connection upgrade, it needs to establish WebSocket. So I'm not talking about, just messing with every single thing. I'm only talking about your core API, right? Your API, which every single application, your clients access, right? Whether that's your front-end client, whether that's your mobile client, or that's a desktop app that you have, anything, right? So you as a person who's building a average app, right? It's not something which is completely unique or completely different, which does not require weird features. I don't know, like, you know, the streaming database queries over internet. I don't know, like whatever. All I'm talking about, if you need an app which performs like basic CRUD operations, modifies user data, performs some operations, give the results back, you don't need this whole mess of states, right? Because what happens is that the more number of APIs you have, for example, register, user. Now, in order to handle this API, there are a bunch of ways you can talk about. For example, 201 created could be a status response code, right? For a user getting created. It could be a 400 series of unauthorized as well, that user already exists, so you are not authorized to create this user account again, right? And I can just give you a bunch of more justifications on different sort of logic. So the problem is that all of them would sound plausible to you. Sometimes it's possible that there are API endpoints which correspond to the right set of status code plus the HTTP method. But in a lot of cases, it's actually the reverse. You would have a lot of possible variations of status code and HTTP methods which would more or less fit in, right? So what this does, this query thing that we recently got, is that it has added one more method to the cesspool of mess that REST already is in the first place. And it gives you more variations to play with. So I would suggest that, I don't know, like this is a super hot take. The last time I said it, I got a lot of angry people. But I would recommend that you should always try to keep your own APIs with POST plus a custom HTTP server, right? To deserialize, log errors, whatever, plus 200 OK as a status code, because you are not using this status code at all in your front-end application. And by the way, I'm talking about, again, like just to clarify so that all of you don't get super mad at me, I'm talking about private APIs. I'm not talking about public APIs. If you have to create like a Postman collection or, something like an open API spec, you can go ahead and use for your public APIs, you can use the status codes and stuff like normal human beings, sure. But I'm sure and I'm hopeful that you're not mixing your private and public APIs together, right? So they are anyway going to be separate. In case of your private APIs, it's better that you reduce the number of states available in the output, right? Now, some people will say that, okay, then how do we use, introspection tools like, if you want to introspect logs, or just figure out if something happens, like a 500 internal error happens or whatever. The thing is that 500 should never happen in the first place from your application, right? If your application is alive, if your app is here, like Node.js or whatever, and if it is reachable, then your application itself should have internal machinery and logging systems to either recover the instances which are dead, or to just report that something has gone terribly wrong and then terminate the process. You should not land into a state which is an undefined state in your app where your app is possibly functioning and returning 200 OK, but the app is in a degraded or an undefined state, like something has crashed in the app itself. So that question itself is actually wrong. A lot of people ask me that, because if your application is returning 200 OK, and if it is truly broken, like something has gone wrong, then it should not be alive in the first place. And for something else which is not in your control entirely, for example, like a CDN, let's say if you have Cloudflare over here and Cloudflare is down, or some problem is there with Cloudflare, then Cloudflare anyway would return a 500 from their side, right? So this anyway is something that is getting logged, which would be a bigger problem for you, that Cloudflare itself has gone down, which was your CDN network or whatever, like it was your middleman. And if you still want to log errors over here, you have the options, right? You have products like Sentry, you have products like PostHog, you have a bunch of these products which can plug inside your code and provide full telemetry on what's going on inside your application. If there are any crashes, anything which requires your attention. So you have to configure and tweak it according to your needs. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. A little rant at the end. I hope I would not upset a lot of you, but if you are upset and if you want to put your point across, do let me know in the comments. What do you think? Where am I wrong in my approach? And I would love to have a discussion, a healthy one with you guys. So that's all for this video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna see you in the next video very soon. If you're still watching, make sure you leave a comment, I watched till the end below, to tell me that you were still here, and let me know what do you think about the video.